got here? What do we got? This is what we got. Alright, let's see. The stream is healthy. Why is it showing up that way? No. This thing's being finicky. Let's see here. Already got stream info. Okay. Cool. Well, hello there. It's Henry with Keepy Mobile. Today we're going to be going over replacing a digitizer connector on an iPhone, or not an iPhone, I'm sorry, iPad mini. Sure, let's, and you guys can see this actually on the microscope right now, so let's go ahead and back this thing out and show you what this connector looks like right now that we're going to be replacing. It is in horrible condition. They had a previous screen replacement done on this iPad mini that went south, I guess, on them, and they messed up the digitizer connector. So we are going to pull this old one off and replace it with a new one and get this lady back her iPad mini. So let's get started. First of all, I am going to switch over straight to the microscope camera just so you guys can see a whole lot of a lot more content than my ugly mug on the screen. So let's switch this over here. Alright, there we go. Well, that was weird. It just went weird on me. Okay, so let's back out of this real quick. I'll give you guys kind of a full, broader view of what we're dealing with here. And I'll show you guys here. So that's in focus. We'll go ahead and move this over. So this is the bottom portion of the main board for the iPad mini, and this is going up towards the top. So let's move this back down into view. We are going to do this with the main board inside of the iPad. We're not going to take this main board out. The one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move these cables right here. I'm going to disconnect those from the main board and get these moved out of the way because I do not want to overheat these, because we're going to be using a combination of soldering iron and hot air. So I'm going to go ahead and move these connectors and get these up and out of the way and bring those over here. We'll just place those right there, up and out of the way, so we don't mess those up. So that gives us access to the main board. So we do not want to mess with this flex cable that we have right here. This is one thing we do not want to get too much heat on. We don't want to damage that. And then right across from there is the battery. Well, you can see the bottom of the battery there. So we have got to be very careful on how much heat and how concentrated the heat is on this main board. I am going to go ahead and put some Kapton tape on the connections above this and on some of those components that I don't want to get overheated. So I'm going to place this right in this area, and that's going to protect that connector that's underneath it. Plus that's going to give me a little bit of shielding. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a I'm going to go with a shield. I'm going to take a portion of a shield that I have and place that over that other connector on the bottom as well, just to kind of shield that from the heat. So that will end up looking like this with the shield on it and the Kapton tape over it. And we are going to go ahead and remove this connector here. No, I'm going to stick with the solder paste, or the solder flux that I'm used to. So let's go ahead and put a little bit of solder flux on this. We're going to try not to make too big of a mess because I don't want to pull this main board out, so it'll be easily cleaned up with some alcohol afterwards that we're done. And let me go ahead and get my hot air station prepped. Go ahead and put the smallest nozzle that I have on it because I do not want to burn that board up. So we will do that. Soldering iron is heated up, so let's get to it. So we're going to apply some heat. We're going to preheat this board up a little bit before we do this because we don't want to thermal shock this board with heat. So we want to do as little damage as we can to this. So we're going to go ahead and heat that connector up. I want to move in with my tweezers here and see if we can pull this off the main board. I do not want to slip while I'm pulling this off and hit anything else that is on this board, because I do not want to damage it. So let's move in a little bit closer with the tip just so we can heat this thing up and get this thing pulled off the board. Like I said, I don't want to damage anything else, so once the other components start to melt, or the other components solder starts to flow, you don't want to heat that too bad, or you will your tweezers will slip and then you'll hit one of those components and jack one of those components up. So I may need to turn the air up just a little bit more, but like I said, I don't want to damage anything. I want to go as slow as possible. The flux is starting to boil, which means that it's doing its job. Come on, little guy, you can go ahead and come off there now. Come on, little connector. Come on. I see you heating up. I may have to bump the air up just a little bit hotter on this. Let's get a little bit more airflow going. Let's go ahead and bump it up to 330 degrees Celsius. Like I said, I'm going to come at this at a different angle because I do not want to heat any of the other components up, especially that other connector for the LCD, because I do not want to melt that connector because these will melt fairly easy under the right amount of heat. So I'm just trying to heat this thing evenly and not damage anything else. Come on, little connector. Always make sure you got your battery unplugged too. One reason why it may be a little bit harder is because we're doing this on the main board, so you got a lot of aluminum right below it, and that's going to tend to want to retain a lot of heat or displace a lot of heat. It's going to act as a heat sink because it is a big chunk of aluminum underneath this thing. So we're going to bump our air speed up just a little bit, or bump our temperature up just a little. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more flux down because you can never have too much flux, especially when you're working on something. Flux doesn't hurt anything, it just makes a giant mess. That's about it. So that should be enough air pressure there to get this thing going. It should come off fairly easy now after this. Yeah, it's getting nice and squishy. Alright, there we go. So heat away, got the old connector off. Like I said, those things melt super easy. Throw that one in the trash. Let's look at this connector now. Let's make sure we didn't damage the connector or pull any pads or move any other components. I want to move this shield just a little bit. I want to look at that other connector underneath. It looks perfectly fine. So we'll put the shield back down, cover that up. Try to keep some of that heat out and away from that other connector. So now I'm going to, come on, work with me here, buddy. Oh, I'm going to loosen this piece of tape up. It's not allowing it to drop down in there. There we go. Alright, that'll work. So now we're going to hit this with a soldering iron just to freshen these pads up a little bit. We'll go ahead and switch tips on this really quick. I'm going to use a flat tip on this part just so I've got a little bit more surface area and this heats up a little quicker. And then we're going to go over this. We're going to lay down some leaded solder because all the solder that they use on, generally most components, all the solder they use is all leaded or unleaded solder, just to save them money and the environment. But I like leaded. It seems to work out a little bit better. So move this back down a little bit. Let's get this over here. Put that shield back down, and let me move my camera itself so you guys can see this. Alright, there we go. So I'm going to go over this stuff. Pull out this little piece here that we don't need. This little metal piece I got stuck whenever we were pulling that connector off. Okay. Lay down a little bit more flux, and then we'll run over that with some leaded solder. And we'll be well on our way to put the new connector on. So let's go ahead and go over this stuff real quick. Go across the top here, go across the bottom, just get all this nasty solder off here. And take a piece of my leaded solder. Let's go ahead and bring this into the camera view. Go ahead and put some leaded solder on this. Now, I do not wick these pads because you can easily tear up a pad on these boards. And once you tear up a pad off, you've got to go through and find the trace, redo the pads, and it is not a fun time. So that's one thing you don't want to do, is tear a pad. So wicking is basically a giant piece of copper. Well, not giant, but it's copper that looks woven, and it is made there for wicking up old solder, taking solder off a board. You can use it on big traces, but when it comes to little ones like this, you don't want to hit these any more than what you have to, because you can tear these traces up. So with that done, I am going to go ahead and switch tips back out on this soldering iron. I'm going to go ahead and use a pointed tip or curved tip on it, just so I can get in there and easily get to that. I'm going to open up my bag here with the components in it. Let's go to scope and cam. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my little bag here that has got our components. And these are the new connectors. I went ahead and bought 5 of them just so I could make this work a little bit better. So we are going to open this up now and drop one of these connectors out onto the table. Come on, work with me, buddy. Okay, so we'll pull one of those connectors out. We'll drop it right there. Put these back in here. And with the soldering iron, I'm going to go, more than likely, I will use, how do I want to approach this? I'm going to tack down one corner with a soldering iron on this connector. So we'll go ahead and bring this over here. Place that down on the board. And orientate this in the right way. And these connectors are the same on both sides, so you're not going to hurt it putting it on one way or the other, as long as you get all the pads to touch. Come on. And it is fun sometimes trying to get these things aligned just right, because they want to move. So I may use 2 tweezers to hold one spot down and use the other one to do this. So let's go ahead and put that up there. Let's bump it just a little bit more up towards the top. That looks good. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. This may be a little bit rough for you guys to see this. I've got a new camera coming in for the top of my microscope, so we can see a lot better. So you guys have a better field of view than what you guys have now, because you guys can't see a whole lot. It's pretty skewed, pretty limited on what you guys can see. So I'll bump this connector up just a little bit more. Set in the right spot. All those pads are lined up. So now I am going to go ahead and tack down one part of this connector. We'll go ahead and zoom out here so you guys can see this. So there's the connector. I'm going to go ahead and tack down one edge of it and try not to burn this connector while I'm doing it. So let's see here. Let me put a little bit of solder on the tip of my soldering iron. With one hand I'm going to place my tweezers down. With the other hand I'm just going to touch, just like I did. So what that's going to do is that's going to place the orientation of this right where it needs to be. See, I burnt that one just a little bit. Oh no, came intact. So that's going to place that right where that needs to be. It could be moved over a little bit more. Let me see if I got it tacked down completely. This is like one of the easiest repairs to do. I hope I don't botch this repair on live stream. So I'm going to get a little bit more solder right on the tip. Just the tip. I'll go ahead and push this down. Take the tip of my soldering iron, put it right in there. Go ahead and do that on both sides. Whoa! See that big old spot there? Okay. That should be good to tack that down. Go ahead and put some more flux on here. And what I'm going to do now is see if there is any solder underneath. Well, monkey. Son of a monkey. This did not tack down correctly. Look at me. I ended up botching this. My connector didn't leave me with a whole lot to tack it down with, did it? Let me pull this connector off real quick. Let me look at the bottom side of this. Oh, there's not a tab on the bottom side of this one. I may have to use a different connector. Okay, so let's go back over these real quick. Hit these with the soldering iron. Let's go ahead and lay some solder down on these, so all I got to do is touch it with the soldering iron. Because I may not want to use hot air on this portion of it. Okay, that looks a lot better. Except for that spot right up there. Clean this tip off. Alright, much better. Alright, so let's inspect this next connector. Make sure I've got the right connector on this thing. Pop out one more. Look at this connector here. Yeah, there's not a whole lot there. Place this on the board. Go ahead and use both tweezers again. You know what? I might try to use some hot air on this, because these connectors are pretty tiny. trying to hold my breath so I get it just right. My OCD is kicking in. I want to make sure that this is completely in line. You don't want it to be out of alignment. It'll kind of jump back into alignment once you start heating it up. The surface tension on that will pull it. So let's use some hot air. Let's go ahead and bump this down to 300 degrees Celsius. Since we're using leaded solder, it's going to melt at a lot lower rate. Go ahead and preheat this board. And we're going to try to come in a little high on this. I don't want to blow this thing off the board, so come in a little high. I don't like the way I did that. One of the easiest repairs for me to do, and it is not going the way I want it to. Just haven't had good luck today. Get that back in alignment. So that's just a little bit of, you see how I was talking about how these will warp pretty easy. So that should be good right there. Okay, go ahead and try to tack this down. See, I may just go ahead and do this. So it looks like that's working a little bit better. Okay. Let's bump it. That is solid. Okay. So I'm just going to go over a couple of these connections real quick and make sure this is cleaned up. And that is how you resolder a connector onto a iPad mini. That looks horrible on the top of that, but I can clean that up. It's not too big of a deal there. So these are all touching, 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 touching. So yeah, all these connections look good. Let's go ahead and move this just a little bit so you can see this end. Ooh, that's not in focus really well for you guys, is it? Put this in focus a little bit better for you guys. Sorry, this is moving all over the place. It's not the most stable table, but it'll work. So that's going to be that connection. And let's flip the board around. I'll go ahead and pull this cap on tape off of here because I'm done with this. Make sure you pull it off slowly, that you don't have any components on there that heated up and it was able to grab onto. Nope, that looks great. So let's flip the board around over here. Let's get this back under the view of the microscope. And make sure this back side has been connected properly. Those are all connected. Ooh, brush right over the top of that. That's fine. We'll clean this up with a razor blade. Go right over the top of this. Just to clean this up a little bit. And that is how you put back on a connector for a iPad mini. Guys, I will see you in the next video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And again, thanks for joining us today. And let me show you how to do this. And we'll see you on the next video.